All right, welcome back. We are going to continue our little adventure here learning about making decisions using our C# code using if statements. But in this one called Ron's Down and Out, it's going to show you something called logical operators so that you can see how we can make more explicit and very specific decisions in our code more than just using if statement. Remember, if statements really are just saying if something happens, yes or no, true or false. I'm going to teach you about logical operators where we can say if this is true and this is true, or this is true and this is true, then do something. Or we can say if this is true or this is true, do something else. So we're going to use logical operators to do that. I also wanted to jazz this up a little bit from previous versions, and I thought I would show you how to do a login, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense to log into this app. I wanted to show you some things about what you can do. You'll notice when this first starts up that all these controls at the bottom are disabled. They're sort of visible, but you can't click on them. That is because these items are in a group box. I'll show you how to do that. You can see them over here on the left. And the group box is turned off by default because I don't want them to be able to place an order at my in and out, down and out place until the server logs in. So if we have a person who's working there log in, watch what happens when we type in their access code. I'm going to type in just a bunch of numbers. First of all, you'll notice you don't see the numbers. That's because I'm using a property of the text box to disguise this for when you're working with passwords, and it's called a password char, C-H-A-R property, and all the text boxes have them. This is not a special text box. If I say log in, I'm going to do a test and say if what they typed in is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, then let's enable this app. Otherwise, don't. And I just keep going around and around a circle. So I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the text box actually reads the 1, 2, 3, 4. It just displays these asterisks on screen, which we're all used to using at ATMs and stuff like that. I made the login button the accept button, which means I can just hit enter, and I'm going to hit enter now. And notice that the main menu shows up because it's inside of this group box. Let me just show you the features of it, and then we'll go in and dig in and figure out how it works. Here on the main menu, I've used some radio buttons, and if they want a hamburger, you can click on that and say, place your order. And then I'm using a label on the right side to kind of represent a receipt or a printout of what they're ordering. And then you'll notice I cleared the hamburger radio button because maybe they want to buy another one. That's fine. They can buy as many as they want. And then they want to get some fish and chips, and we maybe get a Cobb salad. Now, as you're ordering things on here, I want to show you that I have kept all the things they're ordering in the label. In the past, when we've worked with a label, we just showed one thing and then it cleared it out. But I'm going to show you how to put in hamburger, for example, and then tell it to, hey, keep that there and add the next item and start it on a new line. Because I want to show you something called escape codes that'll show you how to format your data in controls like this. And then if you want to place a new order, it just erases everything. Now, let me show you something that has to do a little more with the logic I was telling you about with if this is true and this is true, or if this is true or this is true, with using logical operators. Here, if I come in here and I choose, well, I need some fries and a drink, it will say you ordered fries and a drink. That's cool. And then it erases those. But if I say I clicked fries, and say place your order, it'll say your fries would be better with a drink because it knows I didn't pick a drink. If I pick a drink by itself and place the order, it's going to say, hey, your drink will be right there. Okay? So as we look at the code, you'll see that I'm making decisions based upon whether they picked two to begin with, or if they just picked one, and if they picked one, I got to figure out which one they picked. Okay? So that's kind of what that does, and then there's some other things in here I want to show you in terms of coding. And we'll just get out of this for a second and take a look-see at our code. As we start at the top, I made a list of things for you, and you better write these down. In C#, when you want something that says not equal to, use the bang operator and the equal sign. I showed you that before, but make sure you understand that that is what means not equal to. The ampersand, when you use it in a if statement and a logic statement, means and. So you would say if x ampersand y are greater than 2, then do something. So that's just a sign that stands for the word and, so it's a logical test. The pipe character means or. Now the pipe is the key just above the enter key, and you're going to push the shift key down, hold the shift key down and push that key above the enter key, and you'll see that vertical line. That's called a pipe. That stands for or. Remember that the bang operator, the exclamation mark, means not. And then this one here, when you use two of these pups, it's called a conditional and when you use two of these pups, the vertical ones, that's called a conditional or, and I'll explain to you what that is. But you make sure that you write these down and make sure that you read about them in your Merrick book, because these are used all over the place. And the other thing, like I said, I'm going to show you how to use the password char property in the text box to hide those items. And maybe we should look at that first. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on my text box, which I call txtpw for password, and they have a property right there called password char, and you can see that what I did was I put in a little asterisk right there. Okay, so whatever is typed in that text box, whether it's a password or not, it's going to be disguised using that. So if you're going to build an ATM machine, or you want someone to log into a website or something, this is a real nice thing to use. And like I say, it's built into the text box, nothing special. All right, now let's look at see what happens after they log in. And I want to show you a couple things. The thing that I notice when I do a lot of programming is it seems like I'm always building lots of message boxes, and it seems like I'm always retyping the same thing for the title of my message box. So I wanted to show you up here what we can do. We can create what's called a constant. Now a constant is different from a variable in only one respect. This value that I put in here, this string, cannot change during my application when it's running. Nothing can change it, even my own code. So it's just set as a constant. Here's why it's nice. I call this MSG title, and I would encourage you to, when you do constants, put your names of your constants all in caps. That's just a tradition. And then I said this is going to be called Ron's down and out, and I put it right there. So every time I use a message box, I am going to type in MSG title for the title of it. Now here's what's cool about it. Let's say I build this for Ron's down and out, and then Taco Bell or somebody else comes along and says, hey, we need one of those projects. I don't have to go through all my code and change the caption on all the message boxes. I just have to change it here in one place, and all my message boxes will change. So I'm going to show you that when we get down to the message box. So that constant, declared as a string now, is up here outside of any event handler. Notice where I put it. I put it inside the form, and it's outside the constructor, just in its own little blank white area. That means I can use this anywhere inside this form. I have access to it. The next part, the constructor, I showed you that before, and I told you that the initialize component method is what actually builds the controls and puts our form together and all that. But what I decided to do here was I would set the group box to being disabled, and when the way you do that on any control is you type in the name of the control, then you do .enabled equals false. Make sure you know the difference between enabled property and the visible property. If I said the visible property was false, you wouldn't see it at all. The enabled property does what you saw on the screen. You still sort of see a ghost image of it, but you can't work with it. That's a big difference, and beginning students always get that kind of messed up. I wanted to mention that I could have set this enabled property in the property of the group box when I designed it, but I like to set some of these properties right here in my code so that I can see what I'm doing and I can remember what I'm doing. A lot of times when you go back and troubleshoot or try to update a program, you forget some of the properties that you set, and you forget to go look in that box. So that's why I like to do that. And the other thing you can do, even though I did this when I designed the form, I could come in here and say, hey, let's center the form. Remember how we've done that before? When we've looked at the start position of our form, we've sent it to center screen. If you set the start position is going to be equal to form start position and then do another dot and you'll see center screen. That's how we usually do it over in the properties window, but you can do that here. You put it inside your constructor. That's just fine. Okay. Now since I already did it, I'm going to take it out because I don't need that. But those are things that you can put in here because I didn't make a form load event. Let's take a look at the login button when they click on that, and let me show you what I did here. You can see that I used a block if statement again, and I said if what they typed in this text box right here after I trim it. Now remember, you're going to always trim things when you're getting things out of text boxes so you get rid of blanks. If what they typed in there is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, then let's go ahead and enable the group button. We're going to disable the password text box, and we're going to disable the login button again because once they've logged in, there's no reason to do it again. So I'm going to turn those off. Notice here that this is great for testing and doing a demo like this, but you would never ever do this in a real application because you don't want to hard code any data like this inside your application, because obviously someone couldn't reset their password, no one could change it, and that's just something you wouldn't do. But for what I'm doing, it demonstrates the point. The other thing I want to point out to you is this: when you're turning the enable property on and off like this, make sure you have a block of code that handles a situation for the opposite scenario. So for example, if they did type it in correctly, go ahead and enable these and disable them, whatever you're going to do. But if they didn't do it right, make sure you go back in and set them appropriately for when the other condition is true. Okay, if they did it, do this block. If they didn't, do this block. And you've got to make sure that you put both of those in always, no matter what you're doing, so that you don't get messed up, and so the program will work in a logical order. So all this does is enable the big group box. And the group box, this little guy right here, you'll find it in the toolbox here under the containers section. Here he is, a group box, and you just drag it over onto your form, and then you can drag controls in it, and then you can grab on this thing and move them all around whatever you want to. I renamed it to call main menu by simply going to the group box and changing its text property. We call them, or name them rather, with a GRP prefix. Now remember, we use TXT for text boxes and all that. Well, let's use GRP for group boxes. So I just called it GRP menu. And this one up here I just put on here, I don't need, but you can see you can resize it and stuff. It's very, very handy to control a bunch of different types of controls, and you can have several group boxes and have them all work independently. It's very cool. All right. Now, after we enable this, then of course they can start placing an order. So if they pick something and then press the BTN Go button, here's where we have a list of what we're going to do when they order things from the menu. So let's take a little look. The first thing I'm going to do is say if they clicked on the radio button called hamburger, and if it is checked. Now remember that the checked property works for radio buttons and check boxes. It's not a click event, it's not a selected event, it's called checked. So if they pick the hamburger, then what I want to do is I want to go to the receipt and I want to say, hey, would you put in your hamburger will be ready soon, and then I want to uncheck it. Okay, that's very simple. But you'll notice that I've done something a little different right in here. And this is what I wanted to teach you. I want the label to not erase hamburger when they come down and order fish. If they order hamburger and a salad or something, I want all those items to remain in the label. Unless you tell it to do that, it'll just erase them and you'll get the last one that they selected. But I want a whole thing because it's going to be like a receipt. So here's how you do it. I'm going to go in here and say, hey, you know, with the receipt, with regards to that, it's going to be plus equal. So that says, that's a shorthand for saying, take whatever's in there and leave it, and we're going to add this to it. That's all that means. Keep what's in there and add this to it. The different thing that you see here is this. What is this \n? This is called an escape sequence or an escape character. And use a \. The N stands for new lines. And you put it right inside your code like this. It doesn't go outside those quotation marks, otherwise it won't work. So just, I know it looks funny, but it just goes in and it tells the computer, hey, I want to format this string and I want to put it on a new line. So here it is on a new line, and let's say they came and ordered fish. Well, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to keep the hamburger Okay, we're going to say plus equals, keep the hamburger. We're going to start a new line, and we're going to say, hey, we're trying to find a fresh fish for you. And if they order a salad after these other two items, we're going to do the same thing. Let's keep whatever was there, okay, the hamburger and the fish. Let's start a new line and say your salad will be ready when the server comes back. In each one of these cases, I have reset these buttons so they could order again. And since I have two lines of code in these if blocks, I must use the curly braces. You notice that's why I did them there. Okay? Now let's take a look at something called logical operators. These are a little bit different, and they're very, very powerful and very, very handy, and I want you to see how this works. And let me just give you a typical scenario. If you're building an ATM machine, the first thing you want to do is have them put in their PIN number, just like I did on this application. If they pick the right PIN number, then I'm going to show a group box, open up the group box, and then I'm going to say, hey, by the way, do you want a receipt with this? The point is, you don't ask for a receipt if they haven't logged in correctly. That would be a waste of time. And this is how these things work. I'm going to deal with the checkboxes now for fries and a drink. And so up here I'm going to say if, and that's all in a standard if statement. If check fries, now check fries, CHK fries, that's the checkbox, dot checked. If they checked the fries and they checked the drink, then we're going to go in here, and again we're going to keep what's in the label, plus equals, new line, and say you ordered fries and a drink, and then I'm just going to reset them. Okay, that's no big deal. Here's what I want to teach you though. If I would have used 1 ampersand, which you can do, the computer will come in here and it will check this and say, is this checked or not? Whether or not it's checked, it will always go check this guy. Okay? And a few years ago, someone came up with the idea of saying, you know what, there's no point in that. I mean, if you're looking to see if they checked them both, if they didn't check fries, then it really doesn't matter if they check drink because you are testing to see if they checked both. So they came up with the idea of using double ampersands, and here's how it works. If this is true, right here, then the computer will go ahead and evaluate this side to see if they're true. If these are both true, then it will run this block of code. If they're not true, it won't run that block of code. Let's take the other situation. Let's say it checks this, and this is false. I didn't check it. If this is false, in an AND scenario like this, the computer will not waste its time checking this one. That's why this is called a conditional AND or a shortcut AND. You have to be careful with it because sometimes you want it to evaluate both sides, but in this case it didn't matter. If they didn't pick both of these, then I don't want them to run this code. Okay, so you make sure you read about that a little bit and practice that because that's very important to understand how these little things work. When you have two of those, it's called a shortcut or logical operator or conditional AND, and that just means if the first one is false, it won't bother checking the second part of your equation. Now these could be strung out. You could say if they picked fries and a drink, or they picked salad, or a side order of zucchini or something. I mean, you could string these out to make all kinds of very sophisticated decisions, and that's why you have to be careful and understand how they work. All right, let's say they didn't, that this is false. Okay, either they didn't pick fries, or they didn't pick drink, or they picked one or the other. Now I got to figure out which one they picked. If they picked the fries, or they picked this, okay, then I got to figure out which one it was. Okay, so this is a nested. This is called a nested if. Notice we have an if block here, if else block, and then all of a sudden Ron has another one inside of this guy. So we're going to make another decision. This is just like saying, if they logged in correctly to the ATM machine, then let's ask them if they want a receipt. If they want a receipt, we'll say, yes, you're going to get a receipt. Otherwise, we won't print a receipt. Okay? But there's no reason asking them about a receipt down in this block unless they actually logged in correctly. That's the thinking behind this kind of a scenario. So let's check this. If they picked fries or a drink, I've got to figure out which one they picked. So if they didn't pick either one, then none of this is relevant. So it doesn't even look at this. But let's say they picked fries. All right. If the fries are checked, then come down and say your fries would be better with a drink. I can say that because I know they didn't pick a drink. And then I reset this. Again, I'm using a plus equals, new line for everything, just like before. Otherwise, I know they picked one of these. If they picked the drink, then I'm going to say, hey, your drink will be right there. And again, using the plus equals, we're just going to keep adding what's in the list in the label, and we're going to add a new line to it, and then I'm going to reset this. Okay. Now I want you to build this application along with me. I want you to download the one I have, this one here. I want you to look at it. I want you to study it, and I want you to learn how to write these logical decisions using not only if statements by themselves, but incorporate these kind of and or conditions so that you can make your programs do something a little more sophisticated than we have up until now. The new button, all I did is reset the label, because you can see every time they pick something above in the menu, I was always resetting all those radio buttons and checkboxes anyway, so there was no reason to go through and do that. Now, one of the things you could do is you could have a log out button right here, which makes sense. And you could start over, and you'd disable this guy, and you'd disable this guy, and you would enable this one and enable this one, so the next person working there could go ahead and log in. So I didn't do that. So once they log in on this little program, you have to stop the whole thing in order to start over and log in. Okay, so make sure you look at this very carefully. It's got a lot of nice fun little features, and it opens up a whole lot of possibilities for you to incorporate into much more sophisticated applications.